Hello, dear soul family. Welcome to the Meditation Mama podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay, mama to three amazing children, and founder of the Meditation Mama Company. On this show, we talk about parenting starseed children, spirituality, motherhood, intuition, and shifting paradigms to create a new way for the new earth. Once a month, I also release a free bonus episode with a channeled meditation that you won't want to miss. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I have Dr. Alaina Puff with me. She is the founder of Flow State Coaching and Consulting, which is really just a safe space for highly intuitive children, adults, and families in Arizona. She is a nationally certified school psychologist turned intuitive coach. And Dr. Puff offers an alternative option to addressing those common mental health systems compared to the rest of modern psychology. She really treats her patients' mind, body, spirit holistically and operates from a strengths based perspective to assist the clients in really just deepening their relationship with their intuition and revealing those unique gifts and abilities. Dr. Puff is highly committed to helping children, adults, families awaken their intuitive gifts and their intuition so that they can reach their highest calling and embody their highest selves. So welcome, Dr. Puff. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Lindsay, for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
I think this is going to be a really fun, informative interview. I am so curious. I want to start with your journey from left brain psychology, child psychology specifically, to intuitive coaching. And feel free to touch on your spiritual awakening here too, whatever you think would be relevant. But I'm fascinated to hear this journey.
Yeah, it was not one that I was anticipating to go on, as they usually aren't. And so, yeah, I would love to share a little bit more about this transition and this season that I'm currently in. I always knew that I wanted to work with children from the time that I was in my own adolescence. I'd always been really interested in kids and child development and how we go from these little vulnerable babies all the way up to these grown human beings. And so, um, as I pursued higher education and went to college, I just wanted to study. I just wanted to understand. There was like this yearning to understand why we become who we become. And I found psychology, and that was kind of a good landing spot as far as like really being able to explore these topics. So I kind of followed that path. And I just went through it. And I went to graduate school where I got my master's in school psychology, because one of the reasons that I was attracted to that field in particular is because if you think about our kids, they spend the majority of their time in school, right? And so I thought, what a great location and place to leverage my skills to be able to impact the most children that I possibly can. And so after getting out of my master's program and starting my work in public education, I was just so excited. I was like, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And I really got the universal two by four in the face when I got out into the field, because what I realized, Lindsay, was that the systems, particularly public education at that time, were not built on the foundation to support our kids. And I saw a lot of gaps in services to be able to help really empower these kids. And I wasn't even tapping into the intuitive, sensitive children that I am now, but just in general, I just saw a lot of kids falling through the cracks. I felt very helpless at times despite like my extensive training and support. And I started to really experience symptoms of burnout. And I was like, there's got to be a different way to do this. And so that led me to the Southwest, where I enrolled in a PhD program. I was like, maybe if I go back and I study this more. And again, this kind of tracks with my journey in the sense that if there was a problem, I always wanted to research it, to analyze it. There had to be a plausible explanation. So went back, got more schooling, graduated, got a bunch of experience working across a variety of settings outside of the school. And when I came out of my PhD program in 2022, that's where I hit my spiritual awakening. Because what I realized was this journey that had spanned well over a decade, you know, was something that professionally I thought as I acquired this knowledge, as I was researching and trying to understand child development and how to best support our kids, that was not sufficient. That there was work that to be done with inside myself that was limiting my ability to help others. And so I kind of went through some personal life changes, going through being a student for since I was 5 years old, and going to kindergarten to, like, being a grown adult woman. It really cracked me open in a way that was so beautiful and so messy at the time, but really started leading me down my own path of healing. And so from there, I just continued to follow it, and my work followed along with me. And so I was, getting ready to apply for licensures to become like a licensed psychologist. I wanted to open my own private practice and see child clients. And a series of events happened where I just decided that that was not the appropriate track for me anymore. And really, what one of the main events was I was working in private practice, just doing traditional therapy with kids, and I was starting to observe the children that were coming in as my clients and some of the experiences they were describing and what their parents were describing. And these were not the same kids from 10 years ago, as far as how they were presenting. These kids were coming in for things like anxiety, depression, ADHD. But as I was like waking up personally in my own world around my spiritually intelligent gifts, I was seeing that my clients had those too. And there was no space in modern mental health to talk about these things. And the parents weren't equipped to even receive that information because, again, it's not often talked about. And so I knew there was something there. And I decided that I needed to create my own business, my own safe harbor for these kids so I can begin educating folks about intuitive, spiritually intelligent children. So it was this parallel process between not only uncovering that in my client, but also uncovering that in myself.
Wow, that is so fascinating. I have so many questions. I want to understand what were you seeing specifically as far as the differences from the children 10 years ago to the children these last few years? What were you noticing? Because they're presenting with the same quote problems, but
Mhm.
what were the differences?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I'll give you an example of some of the things that were coming up in my traditional talk therapy sessions. Like, for example, I had this little boy. He was 7. He was coming in with pretty severe ADHD symptoms to the point that mom ended up putting him on medication because this little angel was just so dysregulated in his body. And he was crawling in his skin and really couldn't have any strategies to self-regulate. He was just really uncomfortable. And so one of the things we were sitting in session and I was doing like some just like breathing strategies, some like, child-friendly meditation strategies with him, and we were playing together. And then he looked at me and he goes, "Dr. Puff, I want to tell you a story." And I said, "Okay." And he proceeds to tell me about a memory that he had when he was inside his mother's womb. And I was sitting there like, so my psychology knowledge tells me that kids don't really form memories, concrete memories, until about the age of 3. So how is this kid telling me about what was happening in his mother's womb? And I just sat there and I listened and I said, "Wow, that's really interesting," because he was sharing about how he was going to come early. He was deciding he was coming early. He was ready to enter the world, and mom had gotten into a car accident in her third trimester and needed to heal. She like hurt her leg, and so he waited. He like sensed it and he was like, "I'm going to wait so mom can heal and be ready for me." And I talked to mom after and I was like, "Did you guys speak about this? Is there like a conversation that happened that I'm missing?" And she's like, he did not, like, we've never talked about the accident. There's no way of him knowing." And so it kind of confirmed and validated this little boy's experience. And I I'll never forget that because I was so struck by just that connection. And I had never experienced a child who could recall all the way back to the womb. But that was so in alignment with the spiritual work I was doing in my own time. Another example is like a little girl who she was 9 and she was such a big empath, and like all of our kids have the capacity to be empathetic, but for highly intuitive kids it's like a marked degree of empathy. And so she came to me for anxiety, panic attacks. She just was really struggling to function, particularly at school. And come to find out through investigating it through this lens, she was actually a hyper empath, meaning when she walked into that classroom, she was not only experiencing her emotions, but she was literally like a sponge absorbing everybody's emotions in that classroom. And then her little body was trying to make sense of, is this my feeling or is that my neighbor's feeling? Is this my feeling or is that my teacher's feeling? And it caused just such bodily distress that she would have these panic symptoms. And so, you're right. Like they were coming in with the traditional, like, problems that I had seen 10 years ago, but the way in which we were kind of working through those difficulties was completely different than ever before.
Did you feel like the parents that were coming to you were open to that? Were they noticing these differences and saying, "Okay, we probably do have to do something different," or do you feel like they wanted the traditional approach?
I think because this was prior to me like opening my business, I was very much just functioning in that traditional
Yeah.
realm. I honestly think like the universe brought these families to me to wake me up, right? Of like, hey, this is your nudge. This is your like proverbial nudge to go in the direction you're meant to. At the time, my families weren't really aware. I mean, they knew traditional psychotherapy. Some of those kids had been in psychotherapy since they were 4 or 5 years old. I mean, years and years and hundreds of thousands of dollars and time and energy into a practice that wasn't serving them or their children for that matter. And so there was variability among parents. And even in my work now, I think I am really intentional at meeting my parents where they're at. You know, there's some parents who haven't had their own awakening and are not even tuned into that, but they're hungry to understand what's going on with their child. And so meeting them there and kind of walking that journey with them versus other parents like yourself, like who are very much dialed in and tuned into this, that makes it a little bit easier to dive right in and kind of speak directly to the consciousness of that.
Yeah, it's almost like you have to work with the child and treat the child, but you're also treating the parent in a way, in sort of like a roundabout way. That's
Correct.
interesting. Hello, quick announcement. Go to the link in my bio and you will get $10 off clean organic CBD and functional mushrooms through Green Compass. If you have never heard of this company, it is an absolute game changer. I have tried so many different CBD companies, and these are by far the most potent and the cleanest. I did not know until last year that the CBD plant really just sucks up everything out of the soil. So if you are not buying from a company where they third party test the soil, you have no idea what you're getting, and that's really scary to me. These CBD products are so amazing for just resetting your nervous system, using them when you can't sleep, in times of anxiety, or just a frustrating day with the kids. I always tell people, no, I really don't drink alcohol, but I do pop my CBD gummies when I need to. And that is my secret to being a happy mom at the end of the day. And also, they just launched functional mushrooms, and I was using a different brand. I wasn't super happy with it, so it came at the perfect time. These are the mushrooms like lion's mane, ashwagandha, tremella. They calm your nervous system, but they also bring you this really gentle wave of energy and so much focus and clarity and just cutting through the mental fog. These are incredible to take in the morning, and half the time I don't even need coffee or tea after that. So check out my link in the bio for $10 off Green Compass CBD and functional mushrooms, and feel free to message me if you have any questions, because I am just in love with this company and I've used pretty much all of their products at this point. I want to understand, okay, so you are at this clinic and you're working on the traditional therapy approach, but it sounds like you're incorporating maybe some slightly spiritual practices like breath work and meditation. Where do you go from there? At what point do you decide I need to move on to full-blown intuitive coaching and therapy?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. I Yes. What the big transition, I'm just trying to like recall my memory. It feels like a
Sure.
lifetime ago and really it was like a year ago. What the big pivot point for me was that really pushed me to open and create flow state was the last step in my journey to becoming a licensed psychologist is taking an exam. And it's like a traditional licensure exam that all psychologists take. And then from there, you could be issued a license in your state. You can start practicing and seeing clients. This was like the boss level for me on the video game. Like I had, went on this arduous journey. I'm the first person in my family to go to college. Like I just overcame so many hurdles to get to this point, and really taking that exam was the last step. But I historically really struggle with test anxiety. I am just like not a good standardized test taker. I remember as a child, as an intuitive child, like clutching my stomach in my classroom as a little girl, like during the standardized test, like so sick to my stomach with anxiety. It just was never something that was a strength for me. And I don't think it is for a lot of our kids. Um, with that being said, I really leaned into my own intuition and my own healing and spirituality, preparing for that exam. And was really trusting my guides in that process. And I was like, all right, like I'm surrendering this. Like if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. So in July 2023, I sat for that exam more confident than I had ever felt in anything before. And the exam is garbage. Like I'm openly talk about, like it measures all aspects of psychology. So like I was answering questions about like
Mhm.
organizational psychology and forensic psychology, things I've never even studied. I was expected to master. And so it's just a very antiquated barrier that keeps really good people from practicing, in my opinion. But I had studied, I did the note cards, everything, like hours and hours and thousands of dollars of study prep materials. And you get the printout at the end. And I walked out to the front of the testing center and she handed me the printout, and I didn't just fail this exam, I bombed it. And for the girl that got straight A's for most of her life and like has really never failed at anything, truly failed, this I crumbled. I literally crumbled in the middle of that testing center. I mean, all my belief systems that had been built around being a perfectionist, about being a higher performing, high achieving woman, were challenged in that moment. And that was God and the universe's way of saying, all right, you thought you were going this way, but we're actually going to take you this way. And so there was a lot that came from that, where I had to turn inward and say, why does this mean so much to me? Why do I feel like this exam or this piece of paper is representative of my value and worth? All the experience, healing that I have done, why does it come down and surmount to this piece of paper? And so I surrendered it. And some people were like, "Well, just take the test again. Like you're so close." And I would go to sit down to study for the test and my body literally would reject it. Like I couldn't even like sit down and concentrate on the information because I was like, this is stupid. And this is where I like to say that I broke through the matrix. Like I really just like punched right through it and was like, you know what? Like my whole life, I've been within the confines of like education, of like being a good girl, like doing what I'm told. And this was a time where I said, screw it. And so I decided to forge my own path. I started talking to people who have licensed psychologists, and I was telling them about the work that I wanted to do. And they were like, girlfriend, the license is going to hinder you from being able to do this work. There's governing boards that are going to look at your work and say, you can't do that with your clients. Like, that's not ethical, or that's not what we're supposed to be doing. And they're like, you're meant to be a trailblazer. And so, yeah, you failed that test for a reason. And you're here to do work differently than anyone else in your field. Follow that. And so I just followed that intuitive ping, and here we are.
That is so powerful. First off, I just want to mention Dr. Alaina Puff is also a manifester. I'm a manifester too, and that is so manifester because we are very much meant to create our own way, create our own path, like you said, be trailblazers. So that just that just really tracks. But also just such a powerful reminder. You could have ignored what the universe was telling you and gone back and just forced that exam again and forced this traditional route where your soul was really pulling you a different direction.
Yes.
But you probably would have ended up in the same place. Maybe it would have taken you a few more years, but I assume you would have ended up in the same place. Or you could have taken the path of least resistance. And what a beautiful path that you've been creating. I mean, I just love this. And it's funny because I know three other traditional therapists, counselors who have now either completely left the space and they're teaching the Akashic records or acting as just a fully intuitive coach, or they're blending the two like yourself. So I feel like this could really be the wave of the future. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
if I'm going to see a therapist, they better be intuitive. That's me personally. And if I'm taking my kids to one, 100%, that's the route I'm going, to blend science with intuition. That's the golden ticket right there.
Agreed. Yeah. And it has been such a journey, like on the personal level for me, because the embodiment of a psychologist that I had taken on has completely been stripped away. And so like a lot of people would be like, I had potential clients who were like, you don't have a license. We don't want to see you. And that like shakes my credibility and like my belief in myself. And I really had to sit in that and be like, is this really about me? Like, is this really like my belief coming through, going back to that piece of paper is the entitlement of my worth and my knowledge. And even like I think the most pushback I've gotten from folks since I made the switch over to intuitive coaching has come within my field. Psychologists, psychiatrists have really been like, what are you doing? Why would you do that? And so I think that comes with anybody who's a trailblazer, who's pushing up against the norm, who's challenging the status quo. And I've really had to root myself in my soul's purpose and mission, which I believe to be is this, work with intuitive and new earth kids. And like stay strong in that, because there's critics, there's people who are going to be judgmental, there's going to be people who are going to be overly critical of what you're doing, and just staying in alignment with that mission is what keeps me getting up every day and continuing to like take the steps to move forward. So it's been a journey for sure.
And you're absolutely an inspiration for these clients because a lot of these kids are going to be called to do the exact same thing, create their own path, do things differently, and the parents too. So, how perfect to have a coach who is doing that herself. I
Oh,
mean,
thank
it's
you.
just perfectly divine and synchronistic, as is everything.
Oh,
So,
thank
I
you. I
want
literally got
to,
chills.
oh, I love it. I want to hear a little more about your process. Like, can you walk me through? I know every child is completely different and presenting with different, symptoms and things, but can you walk me through what an appointment with you looks like? How do you blend the therapy with your intuitive gifts?
Yeah. Um, I would be happy to. So I think kind of going back to when I first started training as a therapist, I started my first rotation of therapy actually in 2020. So everything was virtual with kids. And as I was moving through my doctoral training, I remember talking with some peers, and we were chatting about some, because when you're training, you have supervision with other therapists, and you talk about clients, and you're brainstorming, you're trying to figure out how to support them. And I remember talking to a group of my peers, and they were like, well, we got to get off, we have to go prepare for our sessions. And I said, prepare for your sessions? What the heck does that mean? And they're like, well, we got Johnny coming in at 11, and I have to like get this worksheet ready, and then Miranda's coming in at 12, and we have to get like this coloring activity. And like they were putting preparation in place for these appointments. And that was the first time that I really sat there and I was like, oh my God, I don't do that. And not because I'm lazy or can't plan ahead, but But I didn't realize at the time, even way back then, is that when that child entered my office, I tuned into them. And that's when we decided how we were going to spend those 50 minutes together. And I was like, oh, I can't believe I was doing that before I was even consciously aware. And so, I use those skills. Obviously, I've really been able to hone in on them. And so my work now looks a little bit different. It doesn't feel like it did just a few years ago. And so typically, you mentioned this a few minutes ago. I never wanted to work with adults. I always wanted to work primarily with kids, but I totally got tricked because working with children is working with their parents. And so I primarily am working with parents, at least in my work now, um, because so much of um, this potency of this work is by educating and aligning the parents. Because at the end of the day, you all are spending the most time with your children. And that was the other con of being in traditional therapy. I would have families drop their kids off at my office and say, "Fix my kid, I'll be back in an hour." That was never going to work. That was never going to be a good call to action to support your children. But a lot of people function under like, there's something wrong with my child. I'm dropping them off to be with their therapist. The therapist is going to quote unquote fix them and then we'll be good. But so much of what our children are going through is a reflection of what the parents are experiencing. So when your child is, um, tantruming and just like, being very dysregulated and crying and screaming or throwing things, that they're doing is mirroring your energy. They're just little reflections of you. And so that's really hard for people to hear because they're like, no, no, it's the child, it's not me. And so it's really aligning with parents and caregivers to help them understand like, this isn't to say you're inadequate in any way, but this is to say that you 100% need to engage in your own work for this to be successful. And so that's really the first step in kind of the protocol that I have created is getting parents and caregivers on board of understanding that I'm very direct when I work with clients. I'm like, I'm not here to fix your baby. There's nothing wrong with your baby. I am here to create harmony in your home. And so the first step of that is really education and just helping folks, meeting them where they're at, whether they're very much engaged in their own healing process, they're dialed into their spiritual beliefs, or they're just coming in going, we need something different. Meeting them where they're at, pouring in some love and support into them, helping them get connected to community, to the things that they need. And then we go in and we start dialing in specifically what's going on with their child. And so, depending on what the child's presenting as far as difficulties at home or at school, I really tailor my approach in a way that incorporates some strategies that I used in traditional therapeutic practice. But one of the big things that I integrate, and this depends on the family's openness to it, right, is getting into the energetics of it. That is something that I feel like in traditional therapy, you bring up energy and people are like, what? But this is the limitation with psychotherapy is it's so heady. It's so just like focused on the cognitions and our thinking and our thought patterns. And like that never worked with my intuitive clients. It didn't honestly in my own therapeutic journey, it didn't work with me. I used to do like mental gymnastics with my therapist as a young adult. Like I was like, I don't need this. And so I really like you mentioned in my bio, it's an integration of the mind, body, and spirit. And so when I say spirit, I think it's important because I was just on another podcast where we were talking about how you talk about spirituality and people are like, I don't want to, I don't conform, like it gets people activated. And it's important that in my work, I'm not here to tell you what to believe in, but you need to believe in something. You need to understand there is something else going on here and your child is tuning into it. And so even helping families like reconcile with that because it can pull on very valid trauma. It can pull on religious trauma from the parent's childhood. It can pull on contradicting belief systems between the two parents. It's actually very interesting to see what comes forward. But I think what makes this work so powerful is that it always goes back to the baby, always goes back to the little one. We can always divert whatever like conflict or crunchiness is coming up and really dial that back into the child. And so with that, we put some protocols in place to help support that child. So just some like strategies, really tangible grab and go things that parents can use and incorporate now that they're educated and they understand the reason why their child is tantruming or having panic attacks or won't go in the grocery store, whatever it may be. And then we start integrating those tactics into daily life. The final step in the protocol is really bringing the child in. And that's obviously my favorite part because I love working with children. And that is around empowering our children, right? It's your parents are doing all the things behind the scenes, to help support you. But at the end of the day, we need to have these conversations with our kids because there's so much empowerment that comes from knowing that you have a gift and really understanding that that gift is precious and that it will be with you for the rest of your life. And how can we use that gift to help you reach your highest calling, to reach your highest potential, to draw on that to help others, because that's really why these kids are here. They're here to be trailblazers, like we discussed. They're here to pour goodness into this world. And so the last step of the process is bringing the child into the fold and really helping them understand about their gifts and ways to begin to self-regulate when, the elements of the gift that might make life challenging here on this planet right now, they can begin to self-soothe just like we are as adults. And so that's a very nice like roundabout way to kind of rejoin the family back together. And now they're equipped with tools that they didn't have when they began.
It's beautiful. I was on another podcast recently and she was asking me what one of my biggest learnings was with motherhood. And I pretty much echoed what you just said, that I didn't realize motherhood was very much going to be reparenting myself. And that
Mm,
you have this tiny little version of you or your husband or your partner, it depends, but you have this tiny little version of yourself and it's super triggering. And
oof,
your body and your nervous system can really go haywire. So it's like, what do I need to do to stay calm in this moment? And how can I not take this personally? And how do I need to reparent myself? And what do I need to dive into from my childhood? I mean, there's so much to it. Being a parent just unlocks so much more than you even realize.
100%.
So that very much resonates with me. And I was also just thinking about the empath piece that you were talking about. And I, even as an adult now, still have days where if I wake up and I'm immediately off with the kids and I tried to meditate in my bed a few minutes before I actually get out of bed. But if I just race into the day, I have days where I'm like, I don't know whose energy I have on me right now. I'm feeling all the things. I'm feeling super frazzled. And it can be really difficult to know what's yours and what's not when you're that empath kind of sponge.
Yes.
And it can lead to so much anxiety and just nervous system frazzling. So what do you tell the little ones? What do you tell them to do so that they do understand what's theirs and what's not? Like what kind of practices are you teaching the empath kids?
Yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing your personal experience because I think that's the add-on. I call it an add-on gift because not only is it working with these littles, but it's really like the process of working with parents is helping to go back to the little versions of themselves and reparent that. That's the part of my work that I never anticipated to be part of, and now getting to bear witness to that with the folks who are stepping in. It's just like I could like honestly get emotional just thinking about it because it's so powerful and it starts with them. I think I had it backwards for the longest time where I was like, I got to start with the kids and then I'll get the parents, but it very much starts with the parents. And that takes such bravery, that takes such curiosity and a sense of openness. It's not easy to do for a lot of people. And so I'm just in complete admiration for the folks who are stepping in with that I want to understand myself better so I can better help my child. It literally gets me so razzed. I like love when people are willing to do that because that's how we shape a whole new generation of kids. And so as far as to answer your question about the littles, I'll talk about one strategy that I do with some of my hyper empathetic kids. That little girl that I referenced at the beginning of the episode. What we ended up doing, I didn't do the full protocol on her because I was still developing. I was still tuning into it at the time. So I didn't get the parents as dialed in as I would like. But I really worked a lot with her, and I got to kind of try it out and build something really beautiful. And so the first step that I did with her was really educate her about her hyper empathy. And so for kids, like I'll use the term superpower, because that's something they can connect with. And I said, "Do you know that you have a superpower?" And they look and they go, "What?" And I go, "Yeah, you do." And so helping to educate and validate their experiences, and it's so wild because when I shared their superpower with them, they're like, "Yeah, no, no, duh, Dr. Puff. Like, yeah, I do." And I'm like, "Of course you know that you know that you know." And so really just helping them understand that like those experiences are special and that not all kids are experiencing those. And I say, with your superpower comes great responsibility. And so let's talk about that responsibility. And so we identify like some of the things that could come up with when we don't know how to hone our superpower. And it's a great analogy because you talk about like the Marvel movies or superhero movies, and when a superhero gets their gift to fly, they're flying all crooked and running into things. And so it's a great comparison to help kids realize like just because you have this, you have to practice it. You can't, it's not something that's just given to you and you know how to do. And so we spend time practicing it. And so one of the strategies that really helped the little girl that I referenced, that I've used on other clients since then, is this idea of energy shielding. So I said, okay, imagine, and we would like draw pictures. We'd make it really child friendly, and we'd draw pictures of kids in our class, and they'd have emotion bubbles coming out of them, like angry from getting in a fight with mom on the way to school, sad because my puppy passed away a week ago, like all these things that kids might be carrying into the classroom. And we like made it visual so that she could see like, okay, everybody has their own set of emotions, and they have many occurring emotions. And then we talked about how when she walks into the room, she can feel all that. And then we helped her identify that she has her own emotions that she's carrying into the classroom. And so what we did is we came up with a protocol called an energy shield. And at first we made a physical shield out of like a cardboard box. Again, kids need very tangible understandings of these concepts that can often be very illusory in some way. Like it's not something that's concrete. And so we came up with a cardboard shield, and we talked about how I was throwing like emotion like puppets that I was like throwing them at the shield, and she was blocking them, and I was like, this is the way the shield works. And then we eventually graduated from the physical shield, and we started talking about an energetic shield, and I was like, it's an invisible shield. People can't see it, but it's there. And so what I did is I brought the parents in, and I helped them understand that like this is a morning ritual that you guys have to do in your house before she walks out that door to get on the school bus. She needs to put on her energy shield. And so that was where the buy-in from the parents was absolutely necessary. And I was dealing with a family of hyper empaths, so everybody could use an an energy shield at that point. And so it actually became this really beautiful family bonding activity. And it was all of like 30 seconds in the morning. It wasn't some like sit down for like 10 minutes and try to wrangle your kids. But they would all meet at like the entryway of their home before, mom and dad went off to work and kids went off to school, and they would put on their energy shields. And they would set it was actually an intention setting activity, because they would set their intention for the day. What do I want to do today? What do I want to accomplish? And it was a great like morning ritual for this family that historically mornings had been marked by chaos. But it was also helping reinforce this idea that you can protect yourself from other people's emotions. And so what she was able to end up do is she kept that energy shield in mind as she went into school. And it took some practice. It wasn't instantaneous by any means, but she began differentiating those emotions, and the panic attack the panic attacks stopped completely.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was powerful.
I cannot leave the house without my own energy shield. It's the first thing I do when I wake up as well, and I'll do it for my children. And then typically on the way to school, I'll say, okay, everyone, create your bubble. What color do
Yep.
you want it to be today? But I love the idea of doing it as a family and standing there together, putting on your energy shield, setting an intention. That's incredible. And what a bonding experience as well. I
Yeah.
love that. I'm definitely going to steal that. And I'm definitely going to steal the idea of having my kids draw pictures of their energy shield and the other children's emotions to really solidify that, because I know my oldest gets it, but my 2.5-year-old, no way. So
No.
maybe she'll understand a little more. I think that's just so clever. So clever.
Oh,
Thank you for sharing that.
of course. Yeah.
Hello, just a quick reminder, if you haven't done so already, visit themeditationmama.com for all of your guided meditation needs. I also create personalized, customizable meditations and affirmations, and I do events, which have been so much fun to do these group events. These guided meditations that pour through me are all beautiful channeled transmissions from the divine that really elevate and raise your frequency and open your consciousness. And there is something for everyone, from motherhood, energy healing, clarity and empowerment, releasing, clearing, spiritual and the woo woo. I've got you. So check out themeditationmama.com, and also click on the free meditation link, and I will send you 2 free meditations right to your inbox. Yeah. I'm curious what you're seeing. What are the common threads? I know the threads with my children and their friends, but tell me what you see the most common characteristics of these starseed children, these cosmic kids that have come in that are super intuitive and super empathic. What are you noticing?
Yeah, so I actually created a free quiz, which I can share with you
Oh,
and for
okay.
our listeners because it's a great opportunity. I have one for kids and I have one for adults. And it just goes over the quiz is essentially 10 questions that identifies common characteristics associated with being highly intuitive. And I kind of went into, unfortunately, there's a very limited body of research. There's not a lot talked about this, and like at least in the scientific community. But I found some common symptoms, and so far they have tracked with my lived experience of serving these intuitive children and their family. Um, beyond what I shared already, we obviously have the hyper empathy. So being able to absorb and feel deeply other people's emotions. My deep feelers are some of my favorite to work with because I was a deep feeler and still am a deep feeler. And so I can personally identify with that. As outside of that, some other common characteristics that I see that you might not necessarily link to intuition. Um, one of which is sensory difficulties. So, a lot of my kids that I work with really struggle with like textures and tags on their shirt, textures of food. Certain clothing will bother them. I have some kids with like who won't wear shoes. They really struggle with shoes. They are sensory sensitive when it comes to large crowds. For me, like as an adult, I became very sensitive to going into like shopping malls, grocery stores. I really started struggling in those environments because what I didn't realize was I was actually absorbing all that energy and going in there. It's very chaotic, and it was became very hard for me. Like even going to concerts as a young adult, I like could not feel comfortable in my skin there, and so the sensory piece is a big one. And people come to me all the time with like sensory processing disorders, and I'm like, it's not that this is the issue, it's that your child is intuitive, and that the sensory is their way of expressing that dysregulation because we're not honing in on their gift. Another one that I see is obviously our clairaudient, clairvoyant kids. I work with kids who are very much connected to the other side and other planes, and are dialed into the etheric. And so those ones are super fun because I think that is a great opportunity to educate the family on what that means and help kids really hone those gifts, because those are special. And I think with a lot of younger children in particular, they're very much scared by their experiences. They're like, what am I seeing? What is this? And boogeyman in my closet kind of thing. And so it's really a gift to be able to watch those kids go from being afraid of what they're hearing, seeing, or experiencing to really understanding that that is part of their superpower and that they're in control of it. and really helping them empower them to hone those gifts. So that's, one thing. The other one that I see is like if your child knows something that they shouldn't otherwise know. So like an example of this is um like modern generation would call this vibe checks. Like your child walks into the room and let's say you're arguing with your partner and like you're like whisper arguing, you know how you do, and your child walks in and they go, "Mom, why are you fighting with dad?" And you're like, there is no way that you knew that we were arguing. They can sense that energy when they walk into rooms and spaces. Or like, for example, I had a client where he was telling me like, "Oh, I know what my parents are getting me for my birthday." And I was like, "Okay." And he told me. And so then when mom came to get him, I was like, "Oh, he told me that he knows what you're getting for his birthday." And she's like, "What?" And I was like, huh? And she's like, "We were keeping it from him as a surprise." I was like, "Well, does he have access to like, is there any way he would know?" And she's like, "No, what the heck? This always happens." So our kids are just like dialed into things that we're not even consciously aware that they're dialed into, which can be overwhelming as a parent because you're like, "Wait a second, I'm trying to keep some of this stuff from you." Especially when families are going through things like divorces and things like major life transitions with parents and family structures. Our kids are our intuitive ones are so dialed into that, and so they're taking in all that energy of like a life change. And so that's why, for some kids it's a really hard road to navigate because they're so far advanced compared to kids their age. And then the other one I want to touch on is friendships. I see this a lot. So our intuitive sensitive babies are more likely to have difficulty making and maintaining friendships. I see this come up so often in my work. And the reason for this is I call it like the old soul mentality. You like ever run into somebody and you're like, "You have an old soul." I like know 6-year-olds with old souls. Like it's just really not something you expect. But for our intuitive kids, they are so rooted in connection and wanting to maintain like deep connections with people to really like well beyond what would be developmentally appropriate. Like for a 6-year-old, they don't understand the concept from a developmental perspective of a deep friendship. It's like, I go to school with Jake, like that's the extent of it. But for this group of kids, they already desire those deeper connections. And so, because that's incongruent with their peers, it often causes a lot of conflict or discord, because the other kids in their classroom who may not have these same experiences don't know how to take that in. And your intuitive child can seem overbearing, they can seem othered. And so a lot of kids struggle with how to navigate that with their typical peers. So it's really helping families educate on like this, there's nothing wrong with your kid. And like, let's get them near other children who can really identify with their experiences. And that's why the community piece in my work is so important. Obviously, being located in Arizona, creating a local community here, but also extending that across the virtual platform because these kids are all over the country. I mean, the presentation, I did a parent workshop a few weeks ago, and just under the highly sensitive children umbrella, which is where intuitive kids fall, 1 in 5 kids are falling into that category. Um, so this is not like a small,
Wow.
unique population of kids. Like this is a massive group of children all over the country and the world, all over this planet. And I think we're just not talking about this in the way that in the scale that we should. And that's why I'm just so grateful to come across your work and this podcast because I just want to shout this to everybody so that we can get plugged in with each other and help nurture our kids in the way in which they honestly need us to.
It's so important now more than ever. And I'm noticing just in our area from my son, who's 6, to my 2.5-year-old, and then I have a 4-year-old in between. The younger ones, I can spot the intuitive, starseedy, like empath kid a mile away because that's how my kids are. I'm one of those.
Yep.
And I'm noticing more and more and more in the younger ones' classes. It's like because they gravitate towards each other too. And
Correct.
I'm seeing it, and it's funny because I'm seeing the parents like, huh, what worked on my oldest who's 10 is not working on my youngest who's 4. And it's because these kids that have come in are wildly different, a lot of them. And I think that highly intuitive, highly sensitive population, it's just going to keep growing.
Yeah.
It's going
I
to
mean,
probably become the norm.
yeah, I mean, I truly believe in my own belief systems that they're here to heal our planet. Like, I really do. I don't think this is like coincidence or anything like that. I mean, that's where my mission plugs in is like, I'm here to help steward this group of kids to lead this world. Because clearly, if you look around, there's a lot of darkness out there. There's a lot of we could spend the whole episode talking about how messed up everything is, but in the real time, these children are coming online to heal and promote goodness and light in a world that is often characterized by darkness and pain and suffering. And so I'm just so excited to be able to be just even tangential to that story, and be able to help bring these children forward and help these parents, because at the end of the day, like, your child chose you to be their parent when they decided to come down onto this plane. They literally had all the options of all the people, and they literally chose you. So that is where the other piece of this is it's not only on the backs of our children, but it's helping empower our parents. You are special as well. There is something special about you that your child decided to come down here and choose you to help nourish them through this really sensitive time in their life. And I feel like when I explain that to people, it's like I see a light bulb go off and they're like, "Who, me? Like, why me?" And I'm like, "Well, because you're intuitive, you're dialed in too, because the other piece of it is intuition is a heritable trait. So it's not coincidental that this baby is yours. And that's why I created the adult quiz as well. Because if anybody ever takes the kids quiz, I always say, go over to the adult one and check it out. And and parents are realizing, oh my God, this is me too. And so again, going back to that idea that our children are mirrors or reflections of ourselves, this is the fact that intuition is heritable is just another extension of that. So these babies are choosing you for a reason. And that's why, leaning on support, leaning on community, getting educated about this is really kind of the foundation for making sure that you can give them what they need.
I could not agree more. Everything you said, I 100% resonate with. And I was just speaking about this with a friend last night, how before I was, quote, spiritual and had been working on my intuition, my intuitive gifts, my intuition was always very high. It was just more muddy then. And every every incredible thing that has happened in my life, every important move, every job, every important person, it was because my intuition very much led me there. And now I can look back and I can see all of that. At the time, I wouldn't have said that. But I agree. I think that it absolutely isn't inheritable, and we're all intuitive to some degree, but this is more important now than ever. Intuition and also tuning into our discernment, which is part of it.
Yes.
So, yes, yes, yes. So, where can everyone find you? And tell me about any current offerings that you want to share, maybe for like, August, September, October, anything coming down the pipeline for the rest of the year.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I am on all major social media platforms. You can find me, Dr. Alaina Puff, my name, or Flow State AZ is my business page. But either way, will get you to me. And then as far as upcoming offerings, I have some really special offerings that I am broadcasting out to everyone. So my services are not just local to Arizona. It extends. I was just on a connection call with somebody in Jordan, other side of the world. And so it's far reaching, and I have to like pinch myself because I just can't believe it. But like I said, these babies are everywhere, and so people are hungry to find a way to support them, and I'm just like so honored again to be a steward for that. And so, two things that I'm offering. So, two ways to work with me. The first is private coaching. I offer a small container for one on one work. So, this is not your traditional therapy approach. This is a 4-month container where we work together as a family to really address whatever difficulties might be coming up in your home. So I work with, again, some of the things that I mentioned. If your child's having really intense anxiety related symptoms, depression, if you got a child who's really dysregulated and struggling with, common ADHD symptoms, if you're having a hard time with like getting them ready in the morning and you just need strategies, or you just need to create more harmony and peace in your home, even if your child isn't struggling as with some of the things that I mentioned, but you just need that support as a parent, this would be a great container to look into. You get access to me pretty much 24/7, more or less. So it's not like a one appointment a week. And it's a great way to kind of get a bear hug of support. It's really like an inclusive bear hug. And the idea there is that we set goals and we work towards those goals and get your child and your family set up in the right direction. So that's one way. And again, those spots are more limited because my work is really shifting into being more encompassing. And so the second offering is starting at the end of August, I am launching my intuitive parenting group. And this is like, near and dear to the heart. And so this intuitive parenting group is a virtual group. So if you're not local, that's totally fine. We're going to get together on 2 calls a month where we come together for live Q&A with me. And also the opportunity to not only hear from me and my expertise, but to learn from each other, because I always tell parents, you are the expert of your child and of your children. Like, nobody knows them better than you. And so really helping, again, empower parents to bring forth their own lived experiences. And then we're all going to be in a forum together where we'll be sharing experiences, and I'll be producing mini courses in that group that are just like so packed with valuable content around like tiny bite-sized clips where I can be like, for example, how to manage after school time with your intuitive babies, and like giving parents a roadmap of like, here's how you do it. And so they kind of plug and play with what aligns with you. And so there is so much value built into this 4-month group. Again, it's going to run August to the end of November. So kind of, I do it in alignment with the school year, because in my experience of working in school, usually things start out fine. And then right around like end of September, October, things start hitting the fan, or at least that's how it was when I was working in schools. And so the idea is to be preventative and really get you in and get support for back to school season, and then move through that semester together. And so the intuitive parenting group, again, isn't meant to be a huge group. I'm really like hoping to cap it around 15, 20 people. So it's not a ton. And I do have a few spots left for those who are interested. I've gotten a lot of interest on that, which is great. And I think it'll be something that I'll potentially roll into another group as well. But this is a great opportunity, not only to get access to that information, but to connect with other like-minded parents like yourself. If you're sitting here and you're listening to this and you're going, this is great, but like, there's nobody in my community who I could like connect with on this, or, I just feel like this is like taboo, maybe in the circles that I'm running. This is the group for you. This is where we come together and we learn from each other in just such a powerful way. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to be offering that. I really think that it's going to be far reaching to folks who may not otherwise have access to it. And so those are my primary 2 offerings right now. And so, yeah, I would love to see some of you step into those, because it is life-changing in many ways.
Amazing. I love that you're doing this. And I know there's so much more to come. I'm sure of it. So thank you so much, Dr. Puff, for being with us. And thank you for listening. We will see you next time. So, with that being said, thank you so much for listening to the Meditation Mama podcast. Your support means the world to me. So, if you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with a loved one. Check out my meditations and all of my offerings at themeditationmama.com and sign up for my newsletter, and you will receive 2 free meditations. I would also love to hear from you. So send me a message on my Instagram at _meditationmama or an email on my website. See you next time.